In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an impressionist dancer's painting where we contrast the patterning in the background with the line work and the brushwork of the figures to create a sense of movement and energy. Hi everyone, I'm Mike and this is the Sunday Art Show. So I'm beginning with my mixed media A2 paper and the brush tip of a watercolor marker. This is a mid-blue, and you can see I'm holding the pen fairly loosely and quite some distance from the nib, and that allows me to use my wrist and arm just to keep the lines fairly free flowing. So I'm just beginning by putting in some sweeping lines to capture the general shape of this chap's head. So the reference has been taken from the trailer for the 2021 season of Strictly Come Dancing, which I think is called Dancing with the Stars in the US. So it's basically where they pair up celebrity non-dancers with professional dancers, and it's kind of a competition. I think it's a combination of judging scores and public vote, something like that anyway. So now we move on to the female dancer. Let's give this chap a hand. So back to the female dancer. So there's the back of her hair. And that sweeps down there. And then I'm not worrying about any details of the face or anything like that at the moment. We'll put a little indication of a jawline in. Now I can't really see what's going on with her shoulder or arm, so I'm just going to put some indication of a shoulder line there. Then her back kind of comes in here, and then I think she's got trousers on, but I think I'm going to actually just take a bit of artistic license there and imagine that she's wearing a dress that's long and flowing. And that's probably all I'm going to do for those two. And now switching to my other reference photo, I'm really going to use this just to give a sense of space around these two main figures. So I'm particularly interested in the chap that's off in the distance, bottom left of the reference at the moment, but I'm just trying to think where to place him so that it looks fairly believable. Because in the first reference we were more or less at eye level, but this next bit is filmed from a lower angle, but I think it should be okay. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm allowed to have a little bit of artistic license anyway, I'm just trying to create an interesting image. So this chap will put down here, more or less in keeping with what's in the reference. So his arm's coming up there, and then shoots out that way. Made that a little long, that line, but that's okay. And then can't really see too much what's going on with his legs, but I just want an indication of a figure there. And then we've got this other couple over on the right hand side. So I'm going to make these two a little bigger, and I might just change the angle, the viewing angle a little bit to make it seem as if we're looking more or less straight at them rather than looking from below. So here's the guy, his hands coming across. Now I'm sure the thing is, any professional dancers who look at this image will perhaps be thinking, what's going on here? We've got this couple doing one dance and this couple doing another, but from an artistic point of view, I don't mind. So that's what we're going with. But what I'm trying to do here as I draw away is, as you can see, I'm not doing any detail, and often I'm not even completing a full limb. You want to just try and pick out the most dynamic lines and the big shapes, really, because I'm not trying to do a portrait here. I just want to capture a sense of fun and a sense of movement. So again, with the woman on the right, I can't see a huge amount of detail. And for simplicity, I'm going to assume she's got a long flowing dress on as well. And in terms of initial drawing, I'm going to stop there. Now in the background, we've got quite an array of different colours, and there's definitely a sense of visual confusion, which I quite like actually, but I do want the background to be more subdued than the figures. So I've got my interactive acrylics now, and I've got ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, permanent alizarin, tinting white, and cadmium yellow light. Starting out with a 1-inch synthetic flat brush. And I've also got my water bottle here, so I'm just going to, whoops, that's the wrong setting on the nozzle. So I'm just going to lightly mist the background. Now you can see I've got quite a dramatic run in my drawing there. So let's remove that. Not too concerned about the bit on the figure. Okay, so I'm going to begin with some tinting white and just a little corner of the cerulean blue. And I'm going to use the flat brush and the rectangular marks that it's so good at making to put in some rectangles in a random array. So if you look at the reference, there are these quite well ordered and arranged rectangles of blue, but in my painting I'm going to randomize those quite a bit. So let's just grab a bit more paint, and we'll add just a little bit more blue to the mixture. So I'll go a little bit darker over here. Now the reason I'm going a bit darker on the right hand side is that my loose plan is to have these two figures to be quite bold and dark in tone, and then go lighter and lighter again. So to help that effect, if I make the background on the right a little bit darker, that's going to help enhance that dark to light effect on the figures, because if the background's darker, these figures will seem lighter naturally. Now I've got a bit of dry brush effect going on here, and that's okay because that's going to help create a sort of sense of shimmer in the background. So again, don't want to think too much about the size or orientation of these rectangles. I certainly don't want things to appear as if I've painted a regular pattern. I just want really a sense of liveliness, I guess, for the background. So grabbing a little bit more white and mixing that into the blue I've got left on my brush. So obviously for dance there's a lot of movement, that's kind of the point. So I want a sense of energy in the background, and at the moment I'm quite happy with the way that bit's working. So let's go a little bit darker with the blue now. We'll get a little bit more of the cerulean. And we'll get just a little touch of the ultramarine as well. Get a bit of water on the brush. And again, I'll put in some rectangular marks. Some of those will overlap the lighter marks that I've put down. But this time, as you can see, I'm including not only big bold rectangles like the one I'm just putting in now, but also smaller rectangles as well, just by using a shorter brush stroke. And again, for now, I think that will do for that colour. Well, we've established a lot of rectangular, vertical and horizontal marks in the background. In the reference, there are some patches of yellow and orange, which I think are balloons and possibly lights. Either way, I'm going to add an element of that now. So again, we'll take some of the tinting white. I've washed my brush out. And we'll grab a little bit of the cadmium yellow light. So again, I'm being fairly careful to keep all the background colours reasonably pale. And I'm just going to put in, to begin with, a little rectangle, but going diagonally this time, of this yellow colour. And again, if I overlap some of the background marks I've put down, that's absolutely fine. But again, having done that, I'm now going to change the way I'm applying the marks so that I don't get too much repetition of exactly the same size and shape of brush stroke. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is put down some highlight colour for any skin which is showing, so faces and hands basically, and some arms. Just adding with a slightly narrower and thinner flat brush some tinting white to the cadmium yellow. Popped in a bit more of that yellow as well. Just going to grab a little touch of the alizarin. And that's probably a pretty good start for a highlight colour. So again, I'm not looking to paint these people's portraits. So we will just, it's actually coming out as a bit more of a mid-tone than I intended, but that's okay. We can add some highlights later. So we've put in a patch of flesh tone for the woman's face there. Back of this chap's neck, I'm probably going to give him a bit more hair on the back than he has in the reference. And we'll put a couple of patches there of that same colour for his ears. His hand is here, so a little flash of colour there. And then I just need to switch to my other reference. And then, so this guy has obviously got a patch of that colour for his face. He's got bare forearms. And then as we move over to the second couple, we can just look at the patches of skin as shapes. So I don't have to draw a hand, I can just kind of indicate with a brush stroke where things might be, and hopefully that will all contribute to a sense of movement in the painting. Now, when you work with the acrylic over the top of the watercolor marker, you will sometimes get some bleeding of the watercolor into the acrylic, but generally speaking, certainly for this type of painting, that's okay. Now, you remember from earlier I had that run of watercolor marker down through this chap off in the distance, and I actually don't mind the way that's looking. So I don't think I'm going to do very much more for him. What I'm actually going to do is grab a little bit more of the cerulean blue, and let's just add the merest touch of the alizarin. And I think what I will do is just add a few hints of that colour to solidify him somewhat, but I'm going to deliberately leave most of that run of watercolour exposed. I quite like the way that works. So I'm not going to do any more to him for the moment. But now moving over to the chap on the right here, let's go with a similar colour for his jacket. So I'm going to grab more paint now, because obviously the figure is larger in frame. I'm going to add a little bit more of the alizarin than I had before. So we get a bolder colour. And I'm going to add a little bit of the tinting white. And again, we'll try and capture something of the folds and the contours of what he's wearing. So I just need to get the surface of the paper just a little bit moist there so the paint moves a little better on the surface. Now he's wearing a dark shirt, so we'll come back and account for that in a moment. So let's grab some blue. I'm coming over here to the left because I want to go back into this colour in a bit for his partner's dress. But for now I'm just mixing in some ultramarine blue, and that may well be sufficient to add a few touches of shadow and add in his dark clothing. So I haven't drawn in any feet, but I actually quite like it like that. Now I've just realised that this lady doesn't have a hand at the moment, so I'm just going to put in a little brush stroke there, which is come out as a slightly different colour. So I've just blended that into the arm. But now I'm going to tackle her dress. So now in order to do that, I can come back to the kind of mildly purple blue I used for the chap's jacket, and I'm going to grab some more of the tinting white to make that a much lighter colour initially. And having done that, we will pop in a bit of that colour, being careful not to go over the hand that I just added. Having said that, I just went over the other arm, but I managed to lift that off with my finger okay, so that's not too bad. And then, try to keep in mind, the shape of, although there is no skirt, or if there is a skirt to the dress, it's got a high split in it, but if it was there, the fabric would perhaps fall over the leg that way and then come out this way. So hopefully we've added a sense of movement there to the dress. And moving over to the couple on the left, coming back in with that dark colour I used for this guy's trousers, I'm going to grab some more of the ultramarine blue, but this time more of the alizarin than I used before. And again, going to just add a bit of water, a little bit of a misting to that side of the painting. So you can see I've already got some like clouding and blooming of the watercolor marker here, and I quite like that. That's adding a sense of movement to the drawing just automatically. But anyway, the purple I've just mixed, I was going to use for this lady's hair. And I think I can probably do the same for the guy's hair as well. Yes, I think that's working fairly well. Now, going with that same colour, I'm going to paint in the chap's jacket. And trousers. And you'll notice that throughout this painting there are often gaps between the line work and the paint I'm applying, and I'm deliberately leaving it that way. I think it adds a certain energy to the finished piece. Now, as I approach the wrist here, I definitely don't want to cover up that blooming of the watercolour I mentioned before, so I'm going to stop his sleeve there, and perhaps a bit of his cuff of his shirt is showing. Now, this guy doesn't even have any legs but from the knee down, so that's okay in terms of the painting, but I do want to indicate that those legs are there. So I'm going to move the brush fairly quickly in the hope of getting a bit of a dry brush effect. And I probably went too far, but nevertheless I quite like the texture, so we'll do that and that. So what I'm probably going to do is crop the painting about here, so it won't look like he's on stilts, but I probably do need to just darken that bit up here a little bit. So I'm hopefully going to be creating some kind of sense of movement and a bit of slight visual confusion as well. That's okay to have in a painting, if it's what you intend. Now for the girl or the woman on the left, just going to get a bit of water into the palette here. And I'm going to take what I've got left on my brush and mix it into that paler colour that I used before. Let's get a bit more white in there. But I'm going to add a little bit more of the alizarin, so that, you know, it's not a pink, it's not a purple, but it's certainly more towards the reddish end of the spectrum than anything I've used so far. So again, I'm going to just mist the surface of the painting with water. The paint I've mixed up has got a reasonable amount of water content, and we'll try and capture something of a dress here with the lightest application of paint I can do, really, so that there are kind of wispy brush strokes within the block of colour. So again, I'm hoping that will create a sense of movement. Well, I've used a very limited palette with this one, and there are quite a few areas that I intended to work up further than I have. So, for example, you know, this woman doesn't have a face, and it's the same for, you know, the other figures, as you can see. My intention had been to do a little bit of modelling, add a little bit of shadow, a little bit of highlight, but I actually quite like leaving the faces blank. I'd intended to include a little hint of a hoop earring here as shown in the reference, but I don't think it needs it. And I'm particularly happy with, you know, this bit here, which I didn't really paint. You know, this is just a consequence of spraying the painting with water and the watercolor marker bleeding. But I like the sense of movement that creates. I'd intended to add some color to this lady's hair, but I'm going to leave it as is. And then I think my favorite figure actually is this chap off in the distance. I've still got that trickle of watercolor marker going through him, and I don't know, there's something about it I really like. I kind of feel it makes you think, you know, you're, as the viewer, you're standing across the other side of the dance floor, and for whatever reason this guy is looking right at you, even though he doesn't have a face. You know, so, you know, maybe you're his dance partner, or maybe he's just recognized you, and, you know, we're in the middle of a James Bond film or something, and you know, he's after you, or you're on the run, whatever it is. But, you know, it's an impressionist painting, so there's almost no detail, but I feel I've captured a reasonable sense of movement. And I think the abstract pattern in the background has created a nice sense of space as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to tune in next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. And thank you very much for watching.